Imagine, a podcast series by Imagine Theatre.
Hello, how are you? This is episode 136 of Imagine Theatre's podcast series, and this time we're chatting to an actor, creative, educator, West End regular and pantomime dame.
For more information, go to their website at www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.
Now, in the last episode, I was joined by Joe Pasquale and Liam Dolan to discuss the stock pantomime character of the comic. Now, if you missed it, you can still check it out along with all of the other previous episodes, and don't forget to subscribe to the series so that you don't miss any future episodes. This time, as I said, I've been joined by the actor, the theatre creative, the educator who's worked across the UK and appeared in countless West End shows. He's the resident dame for Imagine Theatre at the Wyvern Theatre in Swindon. He is David Ashley. How are you, Dash?
I'm really good, thank you, Martin. Lovely to chat to you again. How are you?
I'm really, really good. And this is going to be an interesting conversation because you, I believe, have been in Panto since Jack and the Beanstalk in 1986 at the Wyvern. Is that right?
That is. It was my first job back in 1986. You've done your research, lovely work. I was updating my biography for a job that I'm doing in a couple of weeks. And it just surprises me every single time when I look back and go, however did I get this lucky? And I know that's a bit of a cliche, but I really do look back and think, how did this all happen? Because I think the story is quite remarkable. I started off at primary school. A choir master came from Cirencester, which is where we were living at the time, because Dad was in the RAF, so he was stationed at Rise Norton, and we were living there in Cirencester. Choir master came and said, would anyone like to join the choir? And apparently I just put my hand up, and literally the rest is kind of history. So I got this incredible grounding from Father John Beck and his wife Sue, and literally roll on, however many years later, meeting all these incredible people that really guided me along the way. Molly Tanner being a massive, massive part of an influence and, literally launched me, I suppose, because she was the one that got me into Panto in 1986 at the Wyvern. It's her fault.
So originally you were a chorister,
yes,
and a student of the piano, I think. But as a child, and this is something I ask every guest, do you remember going to see Panto?
I do. I have two, I think they're called core memories. I don't really know. But I've got two massive memories. The first one is going to see, and I can't remember the Panto. I've got a funny feeling it was like Dick Whittington, or it was one of those. And it was in Cirencester again. I must have been about, 7 or 8. And it was at the Barn Theatre, when the Barn was literally the Nissen hut, before it's had its fabulous renovations. The thing I remember is being asked, it was the song sheet, would anyone like to get up? And I remember standing up and I was on the inside, if that makes sense, of the kind of by the wall. And I looked and I went, do you know what, I'm never going to get there. And I remember that disappointment. And the second thing I remember, and I must have been, maybe a few years later, maybe 11 or 12, and we went to see John Inman in Aladdin. And no, I'm lying, in Mother Goose at the Bristol Hippodrome. And I can tell you the colour of the scenery in the scene where Mother Goose regrets becoming beautiful and wealthy. And I absolutely remember the emotion that moment gave me. And I think that moment has been the catalyst of how I direct pantos. That pathos, that moment of regret, the moment of the stakes being so high for this character that it completely moved me, even at that age. And I remember sitting in the audience, kind of feeling how the audience responded to what John was doing. And I thought, this is really magic. So yeah, those two moments are absolutely key.
Was there at any point that sort of light bulb moment of, I want to be any sort of entertainer, any sort of performer?
To be honest with you, Martin, I think what it was the choir. The choir set it all off. I don't know if you know Cirencester, but Cirencester is one of the biggest parish churches in the country. It's huge, and it has massive kind of services and the pomp, the ceremony. There was a massive organ that I learned how to play when I was older, and it was kind of the whole performative element of what that did. that was the thing that led me down the path of being an actor, being a performer. Also, I got involved. There was a dance. One of my school teachers was a contemporary dance teacher as well, so I got involved a little bit in that. I was then joined amateur groups. It kind of all started from the chorister thing, because obviously there were people in the congregation that ran a local amateur society that then I got kind of taken on board on. My dad used to say to me that the only thing you wanted to do was be on stage. You've always known that. You've never had any doubt. You've always known what you wanted to do. And Martin, honestly, I can't remember making the decision to do it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a kind of a light bulb. It literally was, well, I'm doing this then. And kind of not in an arrogant, egotistical way of going, well, I really enjoyed this. I think I can do this. I mean, obviously, completely naive, had not a clue what I was doing. But I did just kind of go, yeah, there was no other option. And that sounds as if, very dramatic. There's nothing else I can do. But actually, I didn't even think about anything else. Dad was in the RAF, mum was a, office manager, my sisters are really clever. And I went, yeah, I'm going to do this because I really love it.
I tell you what, you mentioned Father John, and I don't think there can be many panto dames or performers in the industry in general who started their training at the Royal School of Church Music.
I know. And do you know what? It took me a long time to actually put that on my CV. I don't know why. I think actually you probably hit the nail on the head by saying there's not many performers that were. But I remember crossing paths with a lovely colleague, Paul Blackwell, and he had done the same thing. And I just went, oh my, you've got the same, you went to the, Royal School of Church Music, and he went, yeah. And we had this conversation about there aren't very many of us. And I think it's because I was a bit embarrassed about it. Now I look back and go, idiot. It was the best grounding you could possibly have. We rehearsed Mondays, obviously after school, Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays with the whole choir. If we had a wedding on a Saturday, we'd sing then. And we had 2 services on a Sunday. Plus, we went on tour. We were resident choirs we went Winchester, Worcester, Llandaff. We were the resident choir in Westminster Abbey for the Easter services, which had never happened before. So the level of professionalism and rigour that was required of us, and of course we were paid a tiny amount. So it was a bit of a win-win situation for me. And I loved it. I loved how it elevated things. And I think that's part of how I am as an artist as well. I try and elevate anything that I'm given to kind of find the best version that it could be.
Yeah, I was going to say that what a fabulous musical grounding the Royal School of Church Music is. And I know you went on to train at other places later on, and City University and so on. But I never imagined that the Royal School of Church Music would also prepare you for theatre life, whether that's twice nightly services or UK tours. Yeah. But it turned out to be the perfect place to start.
Exactly. And I think that there was an instinct about it. I mean, there's also, don't get me wrong, there's a big showing off element. I listened back to some of the recordings and I just listened to this kind of, I have to say, I don't recognise the voice at all. I just go, who is that really me? I really sounded that angelic? God knows how. But it's that thing of I can hear me singing a specific high note. And because the church was so big, I could play with the echo in the church. So I could lean into the fact that this note was really resounding around the building. So I'd make it a little bit longer. And I went, you were showing off even more. And I just think it was a natural progression to go, how can I get, because the feeling you get from that is second to none. So you think, well, let's see where this can take. But the big shift for me came when we moved house. So Mum was headhunted by a company, and they then moved to just outside Swindon. And this is a massive turning point. So I was furious, clearly. I think I was 16 or 17, around there, must have been. And we moved halfway through the academic year. At the time, I was livid, but clearly, academic year, who was I kidding back then? So I then was playing at a music festival with a school friend from Cirencester called Lisa Mackay, and she was singing, and I met a lady who said, you play the piano very well. And actually, let me pause that. I'll come back to that in a sec. My sisters went to, it's all coming back, Martin. My sisters went to a ballroom dancing class, and I can't remember the name. Sullivan's, was it? In Cirencester, and they needed a partner. So I went along. Then a few years into that, a jazz teacher arrived who taught tap, and I fell in love with tap. Obviously, with the rhythm of the music that I'd already got, I fell in love with it. So long story short, let's put that in a mix. Let's fast forward to us moving house. So I'd done that for a few years. Molly Tanner was her name, ran the famous Tanwood Theatre School. And she said, you play very well. And I said, thank you very much, but I also sing and I dance a little bit, and I'd like to go into musicals. By that point, I decided that that's what I wanted to do. And she said, well, turn up on Monday morning, play for ballet class, and take as many classes as you can, and I'll see what I can do with you. And the rest, Martin, is, as they say, history. And I, honestly, Molly Tanner. So I've got, like I said, there's a few people who instigated my kind of trajectory. It was, as I said, Father John Beck and his wife Sue, and then it was Molly Tanner, who literally changed everything. I mean, I'm quite emotional even thinking about that time back then, because I don't know what she saw. I don't know how she kind of thought, yes, this kind of rangy 16, 17-year-old, tall, skinny glass of water who played the piano. So turned up Monday morning. My mum and dad were like, what? You've got to do A-levels. Well, what are you doing? So went to Molly Tanner's on Monday morning, played for a ballet class, made up all sorts of stuff. And I took every single class that was possible that I could take. Every dance class, and anything to try and get myself to some sort of standard that I could then audition. And of course, back then, you needed an equity card. Mm-hmm. So Molly was brilliant. Obviously, the Wyvern back then, because they did their pantos, they did completely in-house. So they made the costumes, they made the scenery. There was an orchestra in the pit. There was a band. Oh, it was wonderful. I don't know how she wangled me into the pantomime. And I got my equity card, with our however many 49 weeks or whatever it was back then before they changed it to 35. Or was it 42 weeks that they then changed to 35? And she got me into doing extra work, kind of, any random job to get, playing for concerts for military bases. And we went all over the shop to try and get our full equity card. And of course, from Jack and the Beanstalk, that's when I really dug into, well, this is definitely what I want to do. I did a few commercials through her because she had an agency. And then about 1987, so it was probably just a year that I'd been with Molly Tanner at the Tanwood Theatre School. An audition came in and she said, I think you should go. And of course I was scared, like, yep, we're going to go. Mum, can I have the money for the train fare? That kind of situation. Very long story short, Kurt Gansel, don't know if you remember Kurt Gansel, was a huge casting director in the West End back in the 80s and beyond. And he called Molly and said, why do you keep sending this wimp? Those were his words. And she basically convinced him to see me for this audition, right? It was a massive, massive audition. Anyway, long story short, I did the first audition, and then the feedback was, okay, I'll see him for a recall in 2 weeks' time, but he has to bulk up. He's too skinny. So, Martin, I went to Argos in Swindon, and I got mum and dad to lend me the money. Foolish they were back then. They lent me the money, and I bought a weight training kit. And of course, people put it on the counter for me to pick up. I picked it up, and of course, I instantly dropped it because it weighed a ton. It was like a complete comedy sketch of me doing this. For the 2 weeks, I tried as hard as I could to build some muscle on my rangy, skinny body. I did everything I possibly could. The recall was all day, and it was exhausting. I was started at 9 o'clock, and we finished at about, I don't know, maybe 5 o'clock. I played the piano at one point for them and sang. I did everything. I literally did everything I possibly could to try and, get further or even get the job, if I could even believe that. The director, Joe Layton, came down and called me down. So all the boys were lined up, and I thought, well, this is the final moment. They're going to choose us. And he called me down into the auditorium, and I just went, my heart sank. And I thought, oh, I haven't got it. And he said, this man who had, directed massive Broadway shows, he just finished doing Barnum with Michael Crawford. He said, okay, David, I'd just like, to let you know that you are the first person that we've cast for this show.
Wow.
And I literally stood there shaking. I didn't hear anything else he said past then, but I literally went, I was 18 at the time. And I then went back, I ran back and called the payphone, because it was at the London Palladium, the recalls. And I called Molly and I said, Molly, and this was about 5 o'clock. I said, Molly, they've just offered me the job. I can't believe it. And she said, I know they have. And I went, what do you mean you know they have? She said, Kurt called me at 10 o'clock this morning to offer you the job. I just went, what? I've just been told. And she went, he called me straight away. He saw what you'd done, how hard you'd worked, how you changed, and he offered you the job straight away. You're the first person that I know. I know. I've just been told that by Julian. And it was the most incredible moment. And we started rehearsals. My birthday's in January.
What was the job, David?
So it was a musical called Ziegfeld. It was about the impresario Florence Ziegfeld. It was at the London Palladium. And at the time, it was the most expensive musical the West End had ever seen. It was an incredible experience. Not a particularly brilliant script, but it was an incredible production. And I'm still in contact with them now. These incredible human beings. And my training as an actor then moved up into the next level. And I started learning how to do it from dance captains, from assistant directors, from creatives, from cast members. I didn't know there's green and there's goodness. I was completely green, but I had the most amazing experience, and I still do, because I've never stopped kind of being grateful for the opportunities.
Countless West End shows and, challenging ones as well. Put your skates on for Starlight Express, the Vision in Lycra for Cats. Obviously, massive shows like Les Mis and many others. I saw you, I didn't know who you were at the time. I saw you back in 1990, I think it was, at the Leicester Haymarket.
Seven Brides
for Seven Brothers, giving your Zeke, I think it was.
Yes, it was indeed. And that with the wonderful Gillian Gregory, who choreographed Me and My Girl. So
which you did as well.
Yes, and quite a few of us were lucky enough to audition and get in the show. So it was quite a Me and My Girl cast, which was really lovely. And funnily enough, Me and My Girl had its 40th anniversary. Was it last year or the year before? And we had a huge reunion, and it was one of the best afternoons ever. Those beautiful people. And I remember the producer, Jenny Montefiore, said, it truly was the happiest. That was the kind of one of the bites from the press was the happiest show in town. One of the cast members said, well, Jenny, there's a real reason it was the happiest show in town, because we were the happiest people doing it. And I just went, yeah, we really were. We were looked after beautifully. And it was such a wonderful show. And with Jessica Martin and Gary Wilmot, I mean, dream team. It really was.
So I saw it from the very beginning, in its infancy at Leicester Haymarket, of course, directed by Mike Ockrent, booked by Stephen Fry. I remember interviewing Robert Lindsay and Emma Thompson before anybody really knew what it was going to be like. It threw up talented performers like Rosemary Ford was in it, for instance, who went on to do The Generation Game. And a friend of mine, Howard Rayner, was in it, who I trained with. And also a Leicestershire actor called Roy McCready, who...
my goodness.
He did his fair number of dames previously as well. And what a great cast. But it was the ultimate feel-good show, wasn't it?
Totally. I kind of miss that in the West End, if I'm really honest. In the reunion, Stephen Fry said something really interesting. Well, clearly he's an incredible kind of human being. He said, there's a word missing from this. And he said, it's comedy. This was a musical comedy. Mm-hmm. And I just went, totally. Where are those big musical comedies that you kind of escapism, you want to walk out and kind of feel really, not changed, but really happy because of what you've just seen. It sets you up. I played the overture to a group of students and said, what are the emotions coming through this that you get? And they just went, oh my goodness, it's like a train ride. You're kind of going round, different places, and you can hear all this energy, and it just feels so positive and happy. And you go, yes, it is. Obviously, it's very close to my heart, but I miss those musicals in the West End. You can, obviously, we've had Crazy for You revival recently. There's been Anything Goes before that, but I do go, we do musical comedy really well in this country, and I do feel a bit sad that we don't have more of it. If I'm honest, I'd love me a big kind of lavish Wicked or any of those, but I do miss proper musical comedy.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for me, the closest two shows in recent years that, have a bit of comedy and are uplifting in quite the same way and that real feel-good factor are Hairspray, but also the new version, if you like, of Half a Sixpence with Charlie Stamp and Emma Williams. But let's go back to Panto, because 1986 was your first one at the Wyvern. What about your first Dame? When was that? And when did anybody ever say to you, do you fancy giving Dame a go?
So, Martin, I was doing a really serious musical at Salisbury Playhouse. The musical's called The Hired Man. And it is Howard Goodall and, oh, goodness, I can't remember the writer's name.
Melvin Bragg.
Based on his book. And it is the most beautiful, heart-wrenching, terrible, in all honesty, story of life before, during, and just after the First World War. But it's so incredibly moving. So I was doing this, and I was playing a comedy role. I was playing a comedy role called The Recruiting Officer. And it was a moment just before World War One, kind of, they all get dispatched to the front lines. And I was kind of given this moment, and the associate director, Caroline Leslie, came over and went, "You've not thought about playing Dame, have you?" And part of me went, "I'm in this really serious musical. How are you?" And then I went, "Oh, hold on. It's The Recruiting Officer, isn't it?" And so that Christmas, I played my first Dame. It was Twanky in Aladdin. And the floodgates opened, and it was game over. I just went, well, I'm loving this. I did 2 years in a row there in Salisbury, and oh my goodness, because it's an in-house production, so they wrote it with us in mind. Oh my goodness, was it bliss? I mean, hard work, but I learned such a lot in those venues which are kind of in-house produced. They allow you to develop certain routines, or I've been in Panto before as an ensemble member, but not as a principal. So I'd seen some great Dames working and some great baddies working, but I was able to develop my own style of who she was and who I like to bring out, as it were, every year. So yeah, it was Salisbury.
My Dame was very much Les Dawson, Norman Evans, that sort of Dame. Warm, characterful. What about you? Who influenced you? You mentioned John Inman earlier.
Yeah, I think I look to all the strong women that I've had in my life, I suppose. I also look at Stanley Baxter's, John Inman, the people that I kind of just go, they're not playing I know this is going to sound quite obvious, a man in a dress. They're playing a character. Mm-hmm. The thing I loved about John Inman was the fact I completely believed the character. John didn't come out of character. They were this person. And that's what I kind of held on to. I suppose I look at maybe a little bit of Julie Walters, a little bit. There's something sharp about her wit, but also my Dame is very slow in terms of her processing of certain events that happen. She's got a massive heart, but doesn't really understand what's really going on. So I suppose it's looking at those classics of going, who is the character, as opposed to if it's a man in a dress. Because for me, that I don't play that type of Dame. So it would be Stanley Baxter, and it would be John Inman. Those are my key. Plus Les Dawson, of course, because Les Dawson played a character. Yeah. And if you look at the two Ronnies, Ronnie Barker, you just go, well, Ronnie, an actor is playing a character. Yeah. Depending on how they're dressed, it's still the character. So I suppose those would be my influences.
And over the years, I mean, I can't imagine how many comics you've played opposite. That sort of relationship is crucial to any panto, isn't it? How do you manage that with such a short rehearsal period?
Trust. I honestly, you have to go. If if I really believe that panto is led by two important things, and the first is story, and the second is tradition. We can absolutely find the funny, but if the funny comes before the story, it doesn't really work for me. So it's kind of that really helps. But you're right, it's a really quick process. I mean, I've been really lucky. Paul Burling and I hit it off like, it's like we've worked together forever. And then of course the glorious Ben Goff, who is a wonderful comic, and we hit it off straight away. So I think there's an understanding. It's when people come from the same perspective, that's when it works really, really well.
The joy is as well that you've just mentioned two people there. I've worked with Paul and I know Ben. They are very, very different. Paul's obviously a fabulous impressionist. Ben is multi-talented, excellent musician, fabulous dancer. They're completely different. And that's the joy, isn't it? Because each of them is bringing something completely different.
Definitely. And it challenges me, Martin. It challenges me to look at how I do the Dame in relationship to those people, because I want to serve them as well. It's not just all about, well, I've done X amount of pantos at the Wyvern, blah, blah, blah. It's actually, no. We have to create the best show possible. How can I help you with what I do? And how can you help me? It's a real exchange of kind of work, which I absolutely love. I love it.
I've got an interesting question for you, because we haven't really talked about your career as an educator to various drama schools, other institutions and so on, but also as a director. And the one thing that we talk about a lot is the fact that despite the fact that pantomime employs more actors and performers than any other genre in theatre, there is no formal pantomime training in drama schools. Why do you think that is?
I have no idea. And, I've been teaching since 91. And it stuns me that we will look at worlds like Shakespeare, you look at Chekhov, which are, big, believable characters. And you just go, this is a natural link. If you draw into something, any Shakespeare play, you just go, this is a heightened world. This is a world where the character is what you could say larger than what you could argue larger than what real life is. I would argue, have you watched real life recently? These characters are pretty massive, but it's trying to create a believable large character and how it's all rooted in truth. And you go, so actually the next step is to kind of, move it into panto, because some of the best actors have come from that classical world. The nearest I've ever come to it was I used to musical direct the Gilbert and Sullivans at Arts Education and Art Ed as part of my job. Ian Good was the director. That's what we dealt with, because those characters are larger than life, but have to be believable. So I think you're right. I think it's a real sadness. And part of the joy for me, as well as being a director, I get the chance to work with actors who have never done panto before.
Yeah.
And you can see them on the first day going, I have no idea what this genre is. And then you have the conversation with them going, look, have you done Shakespeare? And they go, yeah. And you go, it's that. And they then see as rehearsal go how truthful this is. It's ridiculous. We're sending someone up a beanstalk, which is completely a ridiculous idea. But if you've got the believability within the situation, if you've got that jeopardy set up, if you've got the dynamic working for you theatrically and emotionally, the audience fall for it left, right and centre, and you go, that's the point. So, yeah, I think it is a disappointment when actually the groundwork of something like Shakespeare and Chekhov is actually present already. It's just part of that canon for me.
I think you're absolutely right. I mentioned the fact that you direct as well, and obviously back at the Wyvern again this Christmas. How do you manage your time as Dame and director? Because it can be challenging, particularly during Tech Week and so on. How do you do that? And is that something you've learnt over time?
Yes, most definitely. I'm very, very lucky. I get to work with some incredible choreographers who also assist as the director as well. So we I'm a big team player. I don't believe in a tutti da capi. I believe in the team, creative team, creates what we need to do. And I include the cast and the crew and the front of house. Literally, we all create this product. But I've worked with Charisse Renaud for quite a few years now, and I adore the storytelling that she brings into the choreography, but also a second set of eyes to go, what's happening over here, or we need to kind of play that a little bit, whatever. And Damien Delaney, who I absolutely adore as well, I've been lucky enough to work with them, and you think it's having that second person. And of course there's a musical director, but they're really busy with the tracks and teaching and getting the harmonies correct and all that. So it's working out how you can balance all of it together. And I think for me, and it's happened quite a few times, I said, please, can I get the music for my song as early as I possibly can? Because I can't learn it. My head is too full of information. If I get it too late, I'm just not going to learn it. And I remember driving. I teach at the Oxford School of Drama. I remember driving, and I literally driving from my house to Oxford Drama, which is about a 35, 40-minute drive, trying to sing these songs. So my director head goes, this is a brilliant number. My actor head goes, I can't learn it. And then, of course, you get into the rehearsal room, and Charisse or Damien will look at me and go, should we do your number today? And I go, no, we need to do the finale. No, we need to do this. No, we need... And they look at me going, Dash, you need to do it early because you won't remember it. And I'll go, I know, but I've got too much to do. So the balance is going, I get to the run through, the producer's run, which is normally at the end of the week. And I literally stand there going, have I blocked this for myself? I had a DSM last year, company manager, say, Dash, you haven't done your opening section. And I went, no, I haven't. So I've got a big list. I mean, life is all about lists for me anyway, but I've got a big list of things. And 9 times out of 10, I won't have done some of my stuff if it's on my own until I literally go, as we're going to do the run through, I'll go, haven't done this. So it's honestly, Martin, it's a real balancing act. But with the team that, we work so beautifully together, that really helps. Honestly, I'm a bit of a control freak. There, I said it. I just go, I like being able to kind of hold all of that as well. So I suppose I'm a worst enemy. Anyone else would go, no, that's far too much. But I'm like that going, no, bring it on. If I could do the lights, I would.
Look, here's a really tricky one for you. I don't know how many pantos you've done over the years now, but do you have a favourite panto title?
I do. And ironically, it's Jack and the Beanstalk. I love Jack and the Beanstalk. I also, there's loads. I also love Cinderella. But there's something about Jack and the Beanstalk that I think it's, I tell you what it is. It's because it's all centred around the family unit. And I love that. I mean, it couldn't be more relevant, I suppose, in any point in history. A family struggling to keep going, but that family unit is the thing that galvanizes them together. As a message to give an audience, I really love that they can see the dynamic within it, they can see the problems that happen, they see, and of course the fantasy land in that too. I absolutely adore it.
It's got all the ingredients, that's for sure. You know, the family unit, the sort of warm, fuzzy feeling that brings, especially at a time where many people are saying the family units are not what they used to be, but also that real adventure. Because for me, that's the only downfall for Cinderella, because there is no real adventure in Cinderella. With Jack and the Beanstalk, there is an obvious baddie, flesh creep aside, the giant looming, that amazing scene where at the back of the stage the doors open and the giant walks out for the first time. It's got that real wow factor. I think it's got everything, hasn't it?
I couldn't agree more. It keeps giving. Some pantos, sadly, the act 2 can fall down a little bit because the story isn't really there. But with Jack, you open act 2 and you're in almost a different show because you're in a different land. So it's a complex one to direct, I think. It's a complex one to kind of look at to make sure that all the dynamics are present. But it's got, like you say, it's got everything. And I love that. I absolutely love it.
Plus the pathos of selling the cow and the magic beans.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think, another big influence on my panto career, I have to mention Susie McKenna at the Hackney Empire.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to do 3 pantos with her there. Sadly, never Jack and the Beanstalk. But she was the one that really worked that pathos into stupid, ridiculous, paired with heart-wrenching pathos. And I learned, again, a massive amount from Susie and how the script was kind of worked and how those emotional elements are present. And I think Jack and the Beanstalk really shows that off.
It's been an absolute pleasure, David. Firstly, before we finish, we've been talking about the Wyvern Theatre, we've been talking about Swindon, and we've been telling people that you're back there this year. But what is the Panto this year?
I'm thrilled, beyond belief actually, that my first job at the Wyvern Theatre was Jack and the Beanstalk.
Uh-huh.
And celebrating my 40th anniversary is Jack and the Beanstalk back at the Wyvern Theatre. I'm over the moon.
How fabulous is that? How fabulous.
Yeah.
Dash, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Always a pleasure, Martin.
And once again, we've ran out of time, I'm afraid. Don't forget to subscribe through your favourite podcast app. Spread the word to anybody you know who loves pantomime. And next time, we'll be chatting to the critically acclaimed, award-winning freelance director, writer and actor who's worked in theatre, television and film. She's perhaps best known for writing and directing the legendary pantomimes at the Hackney Empire. Join me for episode 137 when I'll be talking to Susie McKenna.
Thank you for listening to the latest edition of Just Imagine, the podcast series from Imagine Theatre. And you can find out more by going to www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.